Great to be with you as always. We continue now on the Jordan Rich Show. So many wonderfully talented people in the New England area that we love to highlight on this program particularly. And when it comes to writers, we have some of the best. And one of them is Janet Ruth Young. She wrote a book that got a lot of acclaim called The Opposite of Music. And I want to talk to her about that as well. But the new one is called The Babysitter Murders. And before you think that this is some kind of slasher book, soon to be a motion picture, it's not. Could be a motion picture, but it's not a slasher by any means. It's a psychological thrill ride, and it's also something that's very disturbing at the same time, something we have to pay attention to. I want to, first of all, welcome you, Janet. How are you?
Great, Jordan. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Okay, The Babysitter Murders. I'm reading it, and I'm thinking, okay, you're peering into the mind of a beautiful young lady, and you're seeing and reading the thoughts that she's having, and I say I am actually shaking in my boots. I'm wondering what the heck is going to happen. And obviously the intent is to interest the reader. You certainly got me, but also to talk a little bit about this obsession that she has.
Mm-hmm. It's a sensationalistic book about a serious topic. I deliberately chose The Babysitter Murders as a title that I knew was going to grab a lot of people, but I have a really serious purpose in writing the book. And you have this, as you said, a beautiful 17-year-old high school student named Danny Solomon, and she's a tennis player. She sings in her school a cappella group, and in every other way, she's a great daughter, a great friend. In every other way, she's a normal person, and I work really hard to establish how normal she is. But one day, she sees she's babysitting for a little boy named Alex, who's about 5 years old, and a TV news show comes on about a murder taking place in the Boston area, and she starts thinking, what if I murdered Alex? And then once she's had that thought, she can never get it out of her mind.
It becomes an obsessive-compulsive thought, right? Right. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
If you want to get into that part of it, that's very interesting because people don't associate this type of thought with obsessive compulsion at all. When they think about obsessive-compulsive disorder,
right.
They think of cleaning, checking, not wanting to step on cracks, germ phobias. But obsession is a huge part of it. Well, we think of obsessive-compulsive problems as we think about the externals, the things that you can see. You can see someone not wanting to shake hands, someone using hand sanitizer over and over again. But the thought process has been invisible up till now, and I feel like I'm very lucky because I get to put a mental illness on the map.
Wow, I'm telling you, folks, The Babysitter Murders, you're following this young lady and her friends, and it's interesting because she's got other issues that focus on her obsessive thought process. Her friend, who is thinking about coming out as a lesbian, as a gay student,
right.
And Danny's very sympathetic and very friendly, but at the same time, she obsesses over the fact that I could easily just spill the beans and ruin her life.
Right. I could blurt it out.
Wow.
I could blurt it out in public, and when we're eating with friends in the ice cream shop. I could even blurt it out during an important tennis match.
So she almost images this in her mind.
Right.
It's almost a scene or a movie being painted as she's going along.
Yeah, so it's almost as if Danny's life is going on in two separate worlds. There's her normal world in which she's a very obedient and considerate person, and then there's an other world, a fantasy world, in which she does all these awful things, and she keeps thinking, I could step over that line into this other world. However, I want your listeners to know that Danny doesn't want to do any of these things. It's not like someone who's a sociopath who gets pleasure out of thoughts of killing someone, or someone who's cruel and gets pleasure out of thoughts of humiliating someone. She definitely doesn't want to do these things. And in fact, she only has these thoughts about people she likes and loves. She doesn't have these thoughts about people that she dislikes. So I'm hoping that readers will start to see that pattern even before they fully find out about Danny's diagnosis, her treatment, and everything else. But she's always on the verge of getting into some kind of trouble. I don't know if this is appropriate to say, but she also has, during practice at her a cappella group, she has thoughts of physically touching her middle-aged male music teacher in a very inappropriate way, and she isn't attracted to him. So you keep seeing she doesn't want to do the things, but she can't get them out of her mind. And once she starts thinking about this is the way the illness works. Once she starts, she can't stop.
Right. Janet Ruth Young is my guest. The Babysitter Murders paints a picture of normalcy on the outside, and what's struggling and difficult for this young lady is she can't tell anybody about these thoughts, or they would label her crazy and dangerous. Well, ultimately she does. We're not going to give any more away, but we see what impact that has. Just the idea that you're thinking of something, what impact that can have on your life and on your security.
Mm-hmm. And one of the themes that I try to draw out here is a thought the same as a deed? Should a person be judged for their thoughts? And there are lots of different, depending on what your religion or your philosophy is, there are a lot of different approaches to that question. For instance, remember Jimmy Carter, going back to our former president, who said, I have lusted in my heart, and he thought that was to be attracted to a woman other than his wife was something that he had to apologize for and repent for and be forgiven for. Well, is a thought the same as a deed? I leave that to the readers. It's an interesting question.
How many of us, though, present company included, have had an occasional wisp of a thought, there you are, holding a shotgun and taking revenge on that person who's really wronged you. That and then it goes away. You say, my God, that's ridiculous. But it's something took a little pleasure for a split second. Most people have had that.
Right. They have, and they've also had thoughts that are a lot more like Danny Solomon's, which would be you're at the Park Street subway station. It's crowded, it's rush hour, the train is coming, and you think, what if I jumped onto the tracks? Or what if I pushed this nice person next to me who's just a hardworking person on their way to work? What if I pushed them onto the tracks? Now, the average person thinks that and then just moves on to other thoughts. But someone who has a disorder like Danny's would think that every time they were in the subway station, and it would become really difficult to get to work every day, and they might even end up avoiding being in that situation, which could cause a lot of trouble in and of itself.
She has help throughout this book, but particularly towards the conclusion, where someone who is skilled in this kind of behavior and behavior modification steps in, a therapist. How many therapists, in your estimation, and you've done some research on this, are qualified to handle stuff like this?
Very few. This is actually on the cutting edge of mental health and psychotherapy, and very few therapists would know what to do. In fact, very few people would even diagnose the illness correctly. So I worked very closely with a psychologist named Kimberly Glazier, who specializes in this type of illness, and she reviewed the manuscript and she reviewed the proof stages and so on, and she is someone who's doing the research right now, and one of her issues that she works on is that a lot of therapists don't recognize this illness for what it was. A lot of people would get misdiagnosed, and what's really sad, if they get misdiagnosed, they don't get treated, and they spend their whole lives thinking that they're about to do something horrible and that they're really bad people.
For those who think that I don't want to put you in any kind of cubbyhole here, but people might think that you're writing books for a younger audience. But this is really something that, even though it deals with young people, works on an adult level very well.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I sometimes peek at my reviews, and with the internet, there are a lot more reviews out there than there used to be. And someone said that that it was obviously a book written by an adult, written at teens. And I took issue with that because I didn't write this for teens. I wrote it for humanity. I'm on a mission. I write books about mental illness, and the mission of my life is to liberate humankind from the yoke of stigma. I really want to free people from the way that they're imprisoned to their illnesses. And yes, it's a great book for adults. And by the way, Jordan, the young adult market, that's possibly the only big growth market in book publishing right now. And it's partly because the market includes a lot of people in their 20s and 30s and adults.
The Babysitter Murders is the book we're talking about, brand new from Janet Ruth Young. You also wrote a very highly acclaimed book called The Opposite of Music. I have not read it. I will, because it deals with the subject of depression in a family and what I guess it can do. Again, the stigma. We've talked about this on the air many times. I've talked about my own issues with it, and I'm doing everything I can to fight for people so that they won't be bothered and tied down by that stigma. This is something that we have to address, and literature is a great way to address it, isn't it?
It sure is. And the wonderful thing about literature is the opportunity to get the message out through a story. You found the Babysitter Murders to be a page-turner. A lot of people felt that way about The Opposite of Music, too. It's such a pleasurable, if scary, it's a pleasurable way to get the message and to learn.
Right.
Learning through stories. There's nothing better.
But what's interesting about both books, I'm sure, and I did read The Babysitter Murders, and I will read the other one, is the reaction of people. In The Babysitter Murders, you have a particular police officer who is not very sympathetic, yet you have another one who is. You have parents who are extremely understanding. You have some who want to just completely shut off this young lady and put her away forever. And you even have a particular teacher whose reaction is unusual in that she's thought some terrible things about him, and he's okay with that.
The music teacher?
Yeah.
Yes, he. I mentioned that he's a very compassionate person, and he has taught music in prisons.
Right.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the cops, because I did a good cop, bad cop situation here. And the good cop, bad cop displays the attitudes of people toward mental illness, the two attitudes. It could be suspicion or it can be compassion. And in Danny's story, whether someone chooses to be suspicious of her or compassionate toward her makes all the difference in the way the story plays out and in how her life is going to turn out. So my book is a way of urging people more toward compassion, even if all the outward signs would push you in the other direction, because she ends up talking to people about these horrible thoughts, and there's a national media frenzy, and she's smiling at the time that she says it. And how often have we seen the smiling face, like the shooter of Gabrielle Gifford?
Exactly.
And that's the kind of thing that the media target on. This person was smiling while they committed a crime. They were smiling while they talked about committing horrible deeds. So let's try to get beyond the superficial. And I also do a lot with online newspapers and the anonymous commenters.
Yes. Thank you for that, because we've all been, those of us in the public eye have been the subject of various attacks by those who are anonymous, and it's very, very disturbing to see what's going on these days.
And this is a new frontier in public discourse, because on your show, for instance, if you have people call in, they go through a producer. They have to give their name, at least their first name and probably their town, and then you have a delay. So if the person if the caller is saying something really horrible, that might not get on the air. But I believe that newspapers, by having online versions and by allowing anonymous commenting, I think newspapers are encouraging that stuff. Very often the comments field is not moderated, and it draws more people to the discussion. It draws more eyes to the website, and it probably sells more advertising. I would like newspapers specifically to look more closely at those policies. I
couldn't agree more. Our local papers here in New England, in Boston particularly, and it's the slash and burn, terrorists sometimes who just throw these bombs and then just hide under anonymity. Well, listen, The Babysitter Murders is out. I guess I have an advanced reader's copy. Is it actually out in the stands?
Yes, it is. It came out July 26th. It's available through Amazon. It's at Barnes & Noble, and it's at a lot of the independent bookstores as well.
And your website, please?
JanetRuthYoung.com.
And you live in beautiful Gloucester. Lucky you.
That's right, yeah. I get to write and be a beach bum.
Very good. Great to talk to you, Janet, and you've done a beautiful job. It's a disturbing but a very fascinating look inside someone's brain, and it'll make people think.